Rosenberg, class of '78, and Chair of Reunion for the Alumni Association of Barnard College. On behalf of the AABC Board and the Reunion Committee, we couldn't be happier you're here. Whether you have come from down the street or from across the globe, we would like to welcome you home to Barnard. While much remains the same, so much is new here, from our campus to programs. I'm honored to introduce President Debora L. Spar, who will share these exciting updates and provide a report on what's happened during the past academic year. Debora L. Spar became the 7th president of Barnard College on July 1st, 2008. Since her arrival at the college, President Spar has been a vocal proponent of women's education and leadership. She spearheaded initiatives that include the Athena Center for Leadership Studies, an interdisciplinary center devoted to the theory and practice of women's leadership, and Barnard's Global Symposium Series, an annual gathering of high-profile and accomplished female leaders held each year in a different region of the world. A political scientist by training, President Spar's scholarly research focuses on issues of international political economy. She is the author of numerous books, including, most recently, Wonder Women, Sex, Power, and the Quest for Perfection. A graduate of Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, she received her doctorate in government from Harvard. President Spar is a member of the Academy of Arts and Sciences and currently serves on several boards. Before coming to Barnard, she was the Spangler Family Professor of Business Administration at Harvard Business School. President Spar is married to Miltos Katameras, an architect whose specialty is academic, institutional, and corporate campuses. They are the parents of 3 children. Please join me in welcoming the president of Barnard College, Debora L. Spar.
Thank you, Mary, very much, not only for everything you do, but for the lovely invitation and for going out of the way to pronounce my husband's name correctly. For anyone else, it's like Milton, but there's no N, there's an S. Miltos. It's not a very common name around here. Actually, his real name is Miltiades, but we don't impose that too frequently on people. But thank you all for being here today, despite the rain. It's wonderful to see so many of you, to see so many old friends, new friends, colleagues, people from across the college and, as Mary said, across the world. So thanks to Mary, thanks to the entire AABC Reunion Committee, and to all of the many class reunion committees who work all year long to make these 4 days so memorable. And thanks to all of you, our fabulous alumni, for being here to celebrate Barnard and one another. I've realized in my time here that, and Barnard, of course, is a unique place in many ways, but one of the ways that I find most intriguing is the connection that exists between the current students and the alumni. There are a lot of things we don't have here. We don't have a football team. We don't have... One of the few things I don't have to worry about. We don't have a large rolling campus with a beautiful chapel or a bell tower. So we don't have lots of the rituals that other places have. And so our students don't connect back to the football games or the chapel. They connect to the alums. And so anything we can do as a college to bring the students in front of the alums and the alums in front of the students, it's always magic. So I would encourage you in any ways, while you're here or after you leave, to try to find ways to connect to our students. They love seeing you, getting to know you, and hearing about your lives and what you've all accomplished. And so while this is clearly the sort of the capstone of the year, I'm also very grateful to many of you in this room for things you've done throughout the year, whether it's writing notes to your scholarship recipients, showing up at events, showing up at convocation, which I'll say a few more words about. So thank you for all of that. And I'm delighted to report that this is one of our most highly attended reunions ever, with 1,400 alumni and their guests. So congratulations. All right, I am going to give a relatively brief state of the college. My experience suggests that it's always the question and answers that are most interesting, so I'll try and get through my update relatively quickly, and then we'll have folks in the room with microphones, so I'll be happy to answer any and all questions you might have. But I'm going to give you all apologies to our friends on the board, a version of what I presented to the board earlier this week, and categorizing the year just passed under the three headings of the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we had some of all of those this year. As I said at the board meeting, I started the year promising everybody that this was going to be a calm and easy year. It's totally and completely wrong. It was a very vigorous, busy, and fraught year in many ways. And so again, I'll give you sort of the review under these three headings. Starting with the good, as one always should. There's a lot of amazingly good stuff going on campus. Two of the biggest good things are things that you cannot avoid seeing, and these are the two building projects. You may have noticed, as you're coming over here, if you look to your left, Lehman's not there anymore. Lehman was actually there on Monday. It's not there today. And I have to say, it has been so much fun to watch it come down. There's something, I was never sort of a 4-year-old boy who played with trucks, but I'm feeling like a 4-year-old boy playing with trucks because there's something so tangible about watching a building being eaten by these machines, and that's really what it looked like. So we've all had way too much fun this week just watching the building come down. But obviously, at a more serious level, the building is coming down not just so we can have a construction project, but because we have an incredible new building which is about to go up. And that building, I'm sure it's going to feel like a long process, but it's actually going to happen quite quickly. So once they clear the rubble away, which will happen over the next few weeks, we start what I'm sure will be the most frustrating part, and certainly the noisiest part, which is the excavation, because they'll be drilling down to create extra space for the new building, and then the construction should begin in September. And the new building is going to be spectacular. It will be twice as large in terms of square footage as the existing Lehman. Don't worry, you can walk. We like babies around here. But the architects, we worked with a firm called SOM that some of you may know. They're a very, very historic firm. They've created a building that will look less heavy than the existing Lehman Hall with double the square footage. Part of that is because they are going down. So we're going to build an extension of this conference center. It's hard to, if you don't think in 3 dimensions, it's hard to realize, but you'll be able to walk out of here, out of this room, make a left, and go into breakout rooms. We'll actually have a coat room. We don't have one now. Catering facilities. So there will be a real conference center on the basement level. Then there will be a 4-story library, which will be more or less sort of where the old Lehman was. Most of it will be glass fronted. It will all have green terraces. So the word that the architects keep using is amplify. It's a really good architect's word. But the building will amplify the lawn, because they caught on so quickly that the lawn is sort of the core of campus here. So the lawn will be larger than it currently was, and we'll have these green terraces that sort of slope down, not slope, but step down to the lawn. So the vision I keep having, which will eventually happen, is some wonderful student picking a book up from the shelves, walking out the doors, and sitting on a grassy lawn overlooking the big lawn. So that's where we will be in August of 2018. And then on the north side of the building, there will be a tower that will run directly next to Altschul. And that tower will house the economics, political science, and history departments. It will house a brand new and very exciting computational science center. We are building a real computer science department here at Barnard, thanks to $6 million gifts we've had received for that purpose. And we will really highlight computer science and math in a way that they have never been highlighted on this campus before. And this is something that's been very near and dear to my heart, the provost's heart, and a number of us here on campus. And then the Athena Center, the Barnard Center for Research on Women, will also move into the tower, and they are some of our largest users of conference facilities. So they'll be able to do academic conferences in new facilities. And of course, it will have what all modern undergraduate libraries have to have, a coffee bar, which is crucial. And I will throw out the request that I make at all such occasions, but I will keep throwing it out. As anybody who knows me knows, I rarely exist without a cup of coffee in my hand. And so I'm hoping, and the students also refer to me as D-Spar. I can't seem to make that go away, so I'm just trying to embrace it. So I'm hoping that my legacy at the college at some point will be the D-Spar coffee bar. So for $1 million, please, you can step up and help us create the D-Spar coffee bar. This is going to be my lasting wish here. All right, so that's very exciting. The other thing that's really wonderful, and I would urge you to take a look, is what's happened in what used to be the gym. So as you can imagine, building a building of this size on a campus of this size is really hard. I always use the comparison with Middlebury, where my middle son went to school. I said, when Middlebury wants to build a new building, they just move 6 cows a little to the side and they put up a new building. It's not a problem. For us, it's a huge problem because we can't shut down. So we had another team of architects working on creating what we call swing space. And they came up with what's really been a brilliant, brilliant solution. So the area that used to be the LaFrac Gymnasium is now the LaFrac Center, and they cut it in 2 horizontally. So there's a library on the 1st floor and offices on the 2nd floor. And it's beautiful space. We're not keeping score, but we're pretty sure there's actually more students now regularly studying in the temporary library than ever studied in Lehman. So it's really been a great sort of gift that came out of this project. And then when the new library is created, we'll obviously repurpose the temporary library, hopefully into some kind of a performing arts meeting space. We really don't have enough theater space on campus. And then we'll keep the office space because we just created 10,000 square feet of office space that we never had before. So please take a look. It's kind of miraculous. And if you have any interest in architecture, it's just wonderful to see how they reconceived the space. The other big thing, good thing going on at the college, of course, is the capital campaign. So we formally announced the capital campaign at the Barnard Gala some months ago. We have announced a $400 million target, which is just massive and beyond anything that Barnard has ever tried before. We are already at $265 million. $266 million, I believe. And if we just got $1 million more for the coffee bar, we could be 267. But it's really, to keep using the same word, this is going to be transformative for the college. It already has. It's put us on the map as a different kind of place. No longer sort of the poor sister of the Ivy League, but a serious, increasingly wealthy, increasingly elite school. And that's what we want to be, and that's what we are becoming. So we are working hard. I'm looking at my colleague, Mr. Silver, and several of his colleagues here in the room, spending a lot of time on planes, a lot of time eating salmon, but it's all really important because we can't do what we need to do here without raising those kinds of funds. I should also say that the building project is $150 million, and we've raised all the money for that. So it's been a very, very busy and exciting time. On a related side, we have seen an increased selectivity among our students, among our applicant pool. So I say this every year, but I hope I keep saying it every year. We had a record number of applicants this year, more than we've ever had before. It was 7,071 applicants, which is massive. And from that pool, we selected a wonderful class. Our selectivity percentage was only 16% this year. We've never been that low before. So bad news for the kids who didn't get in, but great news for the incredible young women who will be part of the class. Believe it or not, this is the class of 2020. So we're very excited by that. And as I mentioned at the Alumni of Color dinner last night, we've really been working on diversity and creating an ever more diverse class, and we've been doing quite well on that score. 50% of the incoming class are students of color, and 8% are international. And you see it. When we serve midnight breakfast, when the students walk across the stage in commencement, you see the diversity, you feel the diversity, and it's really been, even in my 8 years here, the change in that direction has been quite dramatic. Another great thing that happened this year, and I'm not going to go into detail on this, but I'll be happy to take questions about it. The faculty oversaw a 2-year curriculum review. They spent 2 years reviewing the existing curriculum, focusing on the required curriculum, the 9 ways of knowing. The 9 ways of knowing, which several of you in this room probably experienced, had been our core curriculum for 15 years. A wonderful curriculum, but these things need to be investigated every few decades or so. And so the faculty took 2 years. They did a great job under the guidance of the provost. They really dug down and thought long and hard about what do we want our required curriculum to be like and look like. And they've come up with a new curriculum called Foundations. The class of 2020 will be the first class to experience that curriculum. And it's a really good curriculum. We tried to make it a little bit leaner. Our students are overworked. They're exhausted. They're taking too many things. They're all triple majoring and doing 3 internships on top of everything else. So we tried to narrow it down a little bit without losing the breadth that we want them to have. And again, I can go into more detail for anyone who wants this, but 2 of the required pieces that we're really interested about. One is learning from New York. So we're really trying to leverage one of our greatest assets, which is being in this amazing city. So every student will have to take some course that pushes her to engage directly with New York City. So a part of this is a fascinating new program called the Harlem Semester, in which we're partnering with various Harlem institutions and really using Harlem as a classroom. Another piece is a program called Learning from the Museums, where we're partnering with the major museums in the city. And so you take an art history class at the Frick. We're working in some of these courses with the International Center for Photography, and they go in and they're digitizing the artifacts from the Frick and then using those to create different kinds of learning. So very exciting. And then the second piece that I'm, again, particularly excited about is we have a technology requirement. We are the first liberal arts college to have a technology requirement. And that, of course, links into the Computational Science Center that we're building and to the creation of a few new professors in the technology fields. And it doesn't mean that every student has to learn to code, but every student has to have, although that would not be a bad thing, but every student has to take some course. It can be a digital humanities course, it can be a hardcore engineering course, but something that exposes her to the emerging technologies. And we've gotten a lot of buzz around this, both among our students and in the broader world, and I think it's a very good thing. All right, finally on the good side, just a lot of really fun events. We've created a new tradition, convocation. We've always had convocation, but we've added a lot of pomp and circumstance to it. So convocation is now for all 4 years. We do it in Riverside Cathedral, which is spectacular, and we invite each and every one of you to join us for convocation. And convocation begins with a parade of the alumni. And it's really one of the most magical moments of the year, because the new students are sitting there, nervous, as they always are, and full of anticipation, and the first thing they see is someone from the class of 1937 walking down the aisle. And so I tell this story all the time, but I love this story, and you may be in the room. When we did it 2 years ago, the woman who was the first down the aisle, class of 37, has a walker. But as she reached the top of the aisle, she said, "I don't need this." And she pushed it aside, and it was such a Barnard moment that I will remember that forever. It was beautiful. Last year's convocation speaker was Dara Richardson-Heron, a class of 85, CEO of the YWCA USA. And we're delighted to announce that Marcia Sells, who was with us this weekend, will be our convocation speaker this year. I don't see Marcia in the room, but we will see her later and celebrate her later today. So that will be terrific. We celebrated the 6th Athena Film Festival this year. I know many of you come to the film festival. It's a fabulous event, and it's growing and bringing another whole set of friends to the college. We had our global symposium in Paris, which was a wonderful event. Many of you here were in the room, were here at that. And we are just continuing our march around the world, highlighting what amazing women are doing in different parts of the world. I've found personally that the Global Symposia, they do many things. They get the Barnard name out there. They create research opportunities for students and faculty. But one of the things they really do is they give our alumni who are far away from New York an opportunity to come to a Barnard event in their part of the world. And that's really been nice. And I know for the Paris event, there was a whole contingent from London that came over together. So it's had a very nice effect of creating new opportunities for alumni engagement. We've also a little bit closer to home, but in what is in many ways still a foreign country, we go to California now once a year. foreign country, in a lovely country. We very wisely go to California in February every year, and we have an LA gala. And it's been great. We raised nearly $400,000 at the LA Gala, all for scholarship. And it's a great way for us to connect with our Los Angeles alums and Los Angeles families. We are getting, California is now the largest sender of students after New York. So we have very large numbers of California students and a lot of families who have sort of LA, New York links. So it's a great place for us to go at least once a year, again in February when it's really nice. And one of the members of our board of trustees, who's also a Barnard dad and a movie star, Dylan McDermott, hosts that gala. So it's just a lot of fun in many regards. And then closer to home, we had, again, our New York City Scholarship Gala. We honored the Milstein family this year. We had over 500 people, and we raised more than $3.1 million, all of which goes direct to scholarships. So very special event. That's the good stuff. There's more good stuff, but I don't want to go on that mode all morning. There's also been some bad stuff, and I'm about to give you the truly bad stuff, and then I will move on. But it's been important, and it's been really quite horrible this year. We lost 2 students this year. In my 8 years here, thankfully we had not had a student death, and we had 2 in the spring semester, and it was horrible and traumatic. One was a junior, one was a senior. And dealing with the effects on the broader community was very hard. I mean, beautiful in some ways to see the students grappling with and responding to this kind of tragedy, but very hard. And we're still in the process of figuring out how best to memorialize Daniela Mofson and Jessie Dietrich, who are the 2 beautiful young women we lost. So toughest thing I've had to do in my time here. But sadly, it is part of the law of large numbers that when you have 2,600 people, these things are going to happen, but they're horrible. And the students did an amazing job of pulling together, but it was hard. And related to that, and this is only one of 2 bad things that I will mention, we had a lot of student fragility this year. It was a tough year. It was a tough year nationwide, and I would say globally. There's bad things happening in the world. And a lot of that stuff, just by definition, trickles down onto our college campus. But to have student deaths in the midst of it was an additional trauma for the students. And so Dean Hinkson and her staff were kept busier than usual, dealing with not just the usual range of student concerns, I don't like my professor, I did badly on my exam, but really deep student fragility. And you see this in the national media all the time, this generation is a pretty fragile generation in general, probably because we, their parents, have wrapped them in cotton wool from the time they were born, and they sort of don't know what to do when there's no one to arrange play dates anymore. But they are a fragile generation, and we need to figure out how to work with them to make sure that they're getting the support they need, and also that they are evolving and maturing into the bold, brave Barnard women that we know and expect them to be. So that's been tough this year. Let me turn now to the ugly, which are the things that have just sort of taken a lot of our time, and they're ongoing issues that we continue to grapple with. And the first you saw as you walked on campus this morning, many of you I'm sure, and that is we are dealing with and negotiating with something we've never had before, which is a newly formed union of our contingent, what we call contingent faculty. That's mostly, but not entirely, adjunct faculty. And I'm sure people have questions, and I'm happy to take them. But it's been a new process for us. Like most colleges, we've never had a union of faculty members. We have 3 unions on the college already, long-standing unions. We have good relations with all of them. We've not had a faculty union before. Most liberal arts colleges have not had faculty unions before. Some of the research universities have had adjunct unionization over the past 2 or 3 years. We're one of the first liberal arts colleges, so it's hard. And you have my personal and institutional commitment on this. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to reach a reasonable settlement. We are negotiating in good faith. We've been at the bargaining table since February now, but it's tough. And whatever contract we sign will become the base point forever, so we want to get it right. And again, I won't go into all the details, but We have many different kinds of faculty here. We have lab assistants, we have visiting faculty, we have the Anna Quindlen writer in residence, we have the Lita Orzek artist in residence. Technically, they are all part of the union, but they don't all perform the same function. So how do you sign a contract that is dealing simultaneously with Twyla Tharp, who was our visiting artist last year, is technically part of the union, as is a lab instructor. So it's a very different union than the union we have, let's say, for our clerical workers. We're more or less, we know how to do those contracts. There's lots of templates. There's no template for how you think about pay, benefits, job security for a visiting artist who will come for a year and a lab assistant and an adjunct faculty member in architecture. We will get there. I know we will get there. We have good folks working on this. But it's going to take a little while, and it's going to be messy. So I ask your patience as we go through that process. The other issue, which may be less obvious to many of you, although I'm sure you've seen it in the media, we are, like every college campus, dealing with a real resurgence of student activism. And I think for the most part, that's a really good thing. The kids are engaged, they're concerned, they're worried about their generation, the planet that we have completely screwed up for them. They're worried about politics, they're worried about income inequality, they're worried about racial tensions and racial inequities, and all of that's getting funneled into our 4 small blocks here. And sorry, some of you have heard me say this before, but on my good days, I find this the best part of my job, because it really is an honor to work with these young women as they're finding their voices. They're young, they're 18 when they first start here, and helping them figure out, okay, here's what you want. How do you get it? How do you think about the compromises? They don't understand power structures. Sort of, obviously, they're 18, but they don't understand, what does the Board of Trustees do? What does the Dean of the College do? If I want a specific set of demands, who do I make those demands to? How do I work with these older people to have my demands heard? So it's been a fascinating process. It's also many times a frustrating process. And I'm writing a little bit about this in the new book I'm starting. I think a lot of this is also being shifted radically by technology. So the dominant form of protest for this generation is a Facebook page. Right? I mean, everything is Facebook. And the question for us older people is, how do I respond to a Facebook page? And what does that mean? So if you get lots of signatures on a Facebook page, what does that mean? Because quite frankly, clicking yes on a Facebook page is really, really easy. You just go this and you're done. So there's not necessarily a lot of commitment behind that like. So how do you figure out what the depth of concern is? How do you think about the quieter voices? Most of our students are not protesting. Most of our students are in the library, whatever form it takes, working. So how do you make sure that their voices get heard when they're not the loud voices? And again, I'm sure there'll be questions, and I'm happy to answer them. But the big activist issues that we've been dealing with, there's sort of 4, and they evolve pretty constantly as one class graduates and the next moves in. Last year, the major activism was around what we now call gender-based misconduct. Sexual assault on campus, how do you protect against it? How do you support survivors of it? And you saw this nationwide. I would certainly not say we've solved that problem, but I will say that problem, thankfully, is quite small on our campus, partly for obvious reasons. We don't have men among our students. Have them across the street, but at least there's a little bit of distance. But we do have some issues, but we've put processes in place and we've worked with the student groups, and I think we're pretty good on that one, and the activism has been much quieter this year. What we've seen new activism, and I was waiting for this one, and they finally showed up this year, fossil fuel divestment. We have a very well-organized group of students, very smart, and I've been working very closely with them to the point that we actually had them come present to the investment committee of the Board of Trustees, which is a little complicated, but they did. And we've now created a task force on divestment, and the students are working with the trustees and with the faculty. It's been a fascinating process. I don't know where we will wind up complicated issue, but I think there's been a lot of learning on all sides as we go through that process. And my hope with this, and I'm probably being idealistic here, I'm really hoping Barnard can be a model for how you deal with these kinds of activist concerns. So I'll let you know next year, where we wind up. But that's been a very interesting form of activism. We've also had, as you would imagine, a lot of more amorphous, but in many ways deeper and broader activism around racial inequities, racial injustice. A lot, and this one I say it's more amorphous because many but not all of the things that our students are being activist around are about things that don't necessarily happen on our campus. You know, they are responding as they should to the broader inequities they're seeing in society, to what they're reading on the news, to what they're experiencing in their homes, and in some cases their home communities, and in some cases their families. And they're also reacting to some things on campus. So the good news, as I said earlier, is that we have a much more diverse student body. The bad news is we don't yet necessarily know exactly how to accommodate this more diverse student body. You know, we sometimes have people who say stupid things. We sometimes have faculty members who say stupid things. We oftentimes have students who are bringing a level of complexity and baggage in their own lives that we don't necessarily know how to support. And oftentimes these are the very students who have the hardest time voicing their needs because they just don't know how to do that yet. So this process is going to take a while. It's hard. But again, I remain hopeful that we will come up with, there's no magic bullet here, we will not solve this one, but that we will find ways to create a more comfortable, equitable, happy campus for all of our students. Dean Hinkson has been a real partner in working through these issues. She's on the front line of them, and she, along with many of our colleagues and students, are working now. We create task forces for all of these big issues, as one does. But we have a good task force on diversity that's slowly making its way through these issues and will present a set of recommendations to me probably early in 2017. And then the last one that cropped up in again, somewhat unpredictable ways is the broader issue of income inequality. And how do we as a campus deal with the fact that some of our students now are coming from very poor backgrounds? Again, you know, the good news here is that we, thanks to the generosity of many of you in this room, we provide full financial aid even for our neediest students. The bad news is sometimes that's still not enough. And so we do as much as we can in terms of having emergency funds for winter coats and school books and things like that. But even so, kids who are coming from truly under-resourced backgrounds have another set of issues. You know, medical insurance over the summer. You know, housing if they're coming from a foster care system. So we are having to learn ways to grapple with their needs, and I think they're learning how best to voice those needs. And again, some of their needs are very specific to our campus. More of them, though, relate to the broader national issues. Income inequity is on the rise in this country. It's never a good time to be a poor person, but it's really bad time to be a poor person now. So, you know, how do we grapple with both the specifics and the broader issues? So, as I will just say in closing, it's been a busy year. There's been a lot of learning going on, a fair amount of pain from time to time, but I think we're closing the year with a little bit of a sigh of relief, but also a great deal of gratitude for what we've experienced this year, and a great deal of excitement for what lies ahead, both around the campaign, the building, and this amazing class of 2020 that we'll now be ushering in. So let me stop there and take whatever questions you might have.
The transgender issue is major all over the United States. Can you bring us up to date on what's happening here at Barnard?
Yes, thank you. So the issue of transgender students was our big issue last year. And I'll keep this relatively short, but for those of you who don't know, we went through a whole thought process last year about how to think about and deal with transgender students. It was, I think, one of the best processes I've been able to participate in here. It was, we heard from a lot of people, a lot of alums, students, parents, and we wound up with an explicit change in policy that the board approved at its March meeting of last year. And the policy is quite explicit. It says that Barnard remains a women's college, and we will accept any applicant, or we will consider any applicant who considers herself and lives consistently as a woman. So regardless of how you were born, if you consistently identify and you live currently as a woman, we will consider you for admission. Our definition is narrower than some of the other sister schools. But this year, it just kind of, the policy went into place, and as far as we know, we didn't actually see any trans women in our applicant pool, but we wouldn't necessarily know. And so really, the implementation issue that remains is a relatively small one. It has a lot of political baggage associated with, but we're going to have to spend some time talking with our faculty about pronouns. So I'm sure we solved the bathroom issue several years ago. So if you're wandering around, you'll notice we have gender-neutral bathrooms. And we were ahead of the curve on that, and that's been fine. We now have issues. We graduated 3 students this past year who transitioned to men during their time here, and actually had a great time and contributed to campus in really positive ways, and really there were no concerns. We just have to make sure that our faculty and our community more broadly use the right pronouns. And this is something that people of a certain age like me still have a hard time getting our minds around, but it's important to the students, and so we're coming up that learning curve. But not a big issue at the end of the day. Yeah, way in the back, and then over on the side, yeah. Just wait for the mic to get you. It'll be there in 1 second.
When you describe the current generation as a fragile one, I wonder if you could be more descriptive and tell us what you see and why you use that word.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and I always worry that I'm sounding, hopelessly middle-aged when I use that word. But we're seeing data across the country. So the number of college students who are seeking mental health counseling is on the rise and rising steadily. Now, much of that is that we societally have made some strides in taking the stigma off mental illness. So students who might not have sought out counseling in the past are now more likely to seek counseling. But in a year of very tight budget constraints, as our board just learned, really, we're making a very small number of additional hires. They're both in the counseling center. So we are having to staff up in terms of our mental health resources. We're also dealing with a generation that many of whom have been medicated much earlier in their lives, whether it be for ADD or ADHD. They're on Ritalin, they're on Adderall. Again, this is not Barnard specific at all. This is countrywide, but they're taking more medicines than we probably did when we were in school. We're seeing kids, and again, this is the flip side of very good news, kids who a generation ago could never have gone to college because they had a level of disability that just made it impossible. Now they can come to college, and that's great, and they're amazing, amazing people, but they do demand different kinds of accommodation. And those kids actually tend not to be the fragile ones, but there are others who are more fragile. And then I do think, and again, this is purely just my own anecdote, and in part because I'm also a mom of kids in these in this demographic. This is when most of us went to school. We got on a bus and we went to school, and we waved goodbye to our parents, and maybe we went to the phone booth at the end of the hall once a week to call them, and that was kind of it. This generation is on their phones to their mothers all the time. They just are. I see them walking across campus, they're talking to their moms. And part of it is a comfort level. When you and I showed up as first years, you had to go through that sitting in the dining hall by yourself until you met somebody, walking across campus and not knowing anybody. What they do is they whip their phones out instead. And you can't be lonely, you can't look like you're alone if you're on your phone. The reverse of that is that they stay closer to their parents. And so Dean Hinkson's office gets this all the time. We have parents calling her office, my office, about the smallest things you can possibly imagine. My favorite one, just because I will use this in my novel someday, is the father who called me insistent that this was a matter so delicate and crucial that only the president could deal with it. His daughter's roommate had shaved her legs in the sink. To which I replied, I will be there with the plunger instantly. But
You know, and it's easy to joke about. But the flip side of this is what we generally say is, have you told your daughter, you know, to go see whoever the appropriate authority is? And oftentimes the parental response is, oh no, don't tell my daughter I called. You know, she'd kill me. So the parents aren't letting the kids grow up to some extent. Now, I'm exaggerating. These are the extreme cases. But we're seeing a lot of this, and we're not seeing a diminution. My prediction, for whatever it's worth, is the pendulum's going to shift back. You know, and as you know, the new generation becomes parents, every generation moves against what their parents did. But we're dealing with what's probably the extreme end of the pendulum right now.
From the sublime to the ridiculous, are there any plans to remodel our swimming pool? We did have a wonderful swim team when I was here. We did do synchronized swimming, which was really way ahead of the curve, and I just wondered.
Yes, so I mentioned quickly, but I didn't go into detail because we don't have detail yet, that once the new building is up, then we will have the luxury and hopefully the funds to think about what we will do with the swing space. So almost for sure, we will keep the top floor for offices because we really need that space. But we will have still the gym floor, if you will, and the pool floor, which is below it. So the pool space is still there. And so there's lots of things we could do. We could convert the whole thing into some kind of a theater complex. We could also convert the whole thing to some kind of a fitness complex. Yes. Several of us have wandered around. The pool deck would make a great sort of Soul Cycle facility. You know, there's lots of things we could do with that. It will we will, when the time is right, and it's probably in another couple of years, we'll bring in new architects and start examining what the other uses of that space will be. But that will probably be the next big building project, along with we have to renovate the science labs. If any of you have opportunity to go to the science labs, they're just not at the level that our students are. So those will be the two next building projects on the horizon.
Hi. On April 30th of this year, the Social Security laws in this country changed. And when you reach age 66, you can get Social Security and then delay it. And when you're 70, you have to get Social Security. And there was a loophole so that you could collect half of your spouse's Social Security. I called up the alumni office several times and asked them to give this financial notification to the alumni of my class and previous classes and classes ahead of mine who would benefit. Some people could make up to about $50,000 on Social Security savings. And the alumni office said, we don't deal with anything that's not Barnard. I said, you could make money for the alumni, and maybe they would contribute more to Barnard if you saw that you took their concerns. And the alumni office refused. And I called again and again. I sent emails again and again. And I think the alumni office does not take the interests of the alumni at heart. And this was an easy example. This was not a political case. This was not a political cause. It was just making money for the alumni of the 60s and 70s and helping people possibly make money, that they would say, hey, the alumni office cares about us. Maybe we should contribute some of this money to Barnard. I just want to tell you that they're so uninformed about alumni.
Yeah.
And I'm really concerned about that.
Well, I will look into that case, and there may be, on that specific one, and I don't know that we're allowed to give anything that could ever be conceived of as financial advice or legal advice. I think we are constrained on that particular one. But I'll look into it, and we will try and see if there is some way we can get that information, even if it doesn't come from us officially. Let me move on.
Regarding your labor negotiation, what percentage of Barnard students are currently taught by adjunct faculty or faculty who would be affected by the negotiation?
So it turns out this is a much harder question to give you a firm number for, so I have to give it to you in categories. Our students' experience varies dramatically depending on their majors. So, for example, I'll give you an extreme example. If you're a music major here, the music major is owned at Columbia. So there's a lot of our students who take the bulk of their classes at Columbia. So that's we don't even know what percentage of their classes are taught by Columbia adjuncts.
If you look at our majors here, again, it varies by major. So if you're a chemistry major, it's virtually none, because our chemistry department is very small. They pride themselves, the senior faculty do all of the teaching. If you're a dance major, it's a lot. Dance is the area where we have the highest number of adjuncts, and that's by design, because one of the beauties of the dance program here, and one of the reasons that we're such a hot school for dancers and people who like to keep dancing, is that our dance classes are taught by working dancers. So you'll get a Twyla Tharp. This year it's Wendy Whelan. That's what we want, because you want dancers teaching dance. And they're teaching, it's not dance theory, it's dance. So if you're a dance major, it's a very high percentage. If it's chemistry, it's a very low percentage. So we can give you the numbers across the board, but it's kind of meaningless. The other area where we do have, dance is the highest, architecture is second, for exactly the same reason. We take advantage of having working architects in the city who do all the studios. So that's what we want, that's the pedagogical reason, but those numbers are high. The other place where we, like most colleges, have a lot of adjuncts is in first year English. So this is the model, for better or worse, at virtually every one of the elite schools, not all, but most of them. To be totally honest, our English faculty don't want to teach first year English, which is really first year writing. So this is part of the core curriculum, that every student has to take a writing intensive course. Those courses are largely taught by adjuncts. And to be totally honest, those are the folks who are most of the energy behind the unionization, with some exceptions, because they do that. Many of them have done that for extended period of times. The dance faculty, the architecture, they tend to be much shorter lived. So Wendy Whelan will be here for a year, and then she goes back to be Wendy Whelan. The people who teach first year English, which is first year writing, they tend to be long-term adjuncts. So that's really, I think, again, the core of the union movement, and we need to figure out how to make contracts that work for them. That's what we'll do. It's just going to take a little while, because we're dealing with such a disparate, as they call it, bargaining unit. We'll get there, but that's what it looks like. Okay, very last one, and then I will let you move on. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the changes in the curriculum? I did the 9 Ways of Knowing. I'm just wondering why you changed the 9 Ways of Knowing to the Foundations.
Well, we changed it because, and this is actually something that had been underway for probably 5 years, but then we had a provost who left, and then an interim provost. You should look at a curriculum every 10 years. It's too important not to. So we were actually a little bit late in reviewing it. And then this was one of the areas that I took myself completely out of. It was totally run by the faculty, and they were very serious about it. And our provost would remember much of this detail better than I'm about to. But the first thing we did was examine sort of what wasn't working all that well. So we've bulked up the first year writing requirement. We really think that's important. And made a few tiny shifts there. They were very cognizant of the fact that our students were struggling in many cases to complete the 9 Ways of Knowing. We had too many students sort of senior year kind of going, oh my God, I kind of forgot to do the quant requirement or something. In part because the requirements, they were just confusing. They were just confusing. One of the biggest issues that our students had, the students were very involved in this, and those of you who took the 9 Ways might remember this, they didn't like the 2-semester lab science requirement. Yeah, that part of the room is very much in agreement. We heard lots of, because students felt that you had to take 2 semesters of the same science lab, so they felt that there was too much pressure around that, and a lot of them were not taking, sorry to be so honest, the harder sciences, because they were worried about getting caught there in 2 semesters. So we wanted to free it so that somebody could say, all right, I don't think I like chemistry, but let me try it, because the risk would come down. The other thing they discovered was that there were real inequities around that lined up with socioeconomic inequities. Kids who were coming in from, if you will, better high schools that had more AP courses, they were able to get out of a lot of the requirements.
Whereas if you had a kid who came from a weaker high school, she had to take all of the requirements. So we were actually putting some of our most vulnerable kids in the toughest position. So we've equalized now. So, and I won't remember all the details of it, but that was very important. Yeah, so and then the technology and the New York requirements came alongside it. We also, everybody, I'm not gonna remember them all. You have to take something that exposes you to global cultures. You have to take something that's quantitative. You have to take 1 semester of lab science. Languages. In the past, I'm gonna get this wrong, it was 4 semesters of language, but you could get out of it with AP credit. And so all the kids who came from strong high schools got out of the language requirement. So now what it is it's 2 semesters for everybody. You can't get out of it. And we don't know how that's going to change registrations. Our guess is that we're going to get more diversity. So we'll have someone who said, all right, I did Spanish in high school. I'm going to try Chinese for 2 semesters. So we're guessing we're going to see more sort of movement among the languages. We'll see. And we also put in process a hard requirement that we have to review this every couple of years to make sure it's working. So thank you. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you over the weekend.